Many people the last month have been wondering what's going on with Kevin Love. 2021 has been the turning point for not Kevin's playing career, but a turning point in his life, which is something that can't be broken down at the surface, but by the end of today's video, you're going to understand what that exactly entails. Kevin's story is a lot to unfold, and in order to fully understand what got us to this point in Kevin Love's professional playing career, we're going to go back to his upbringing 9 miles south of Portland, Oregon, where he spent his early years engulfed in sports. Whether it was Randy Johnson and the Mariners or studying his dad's tapes of Barkley and Hakeem, sports were the biggest part of Kevin's childhood by far. Growing up as a kid, his biggest goal was making it to the NBA, but unlike most of us, that wasn't far-fetched for Kevin. Kevin's dad, Stan, is 6'9", and back in his day was a star at Oregon, and eventually would go on to play 4 seasons in the NBA with a long list of Hall of Famers. So it wasn't to anyone's surprise when Kevin started slugging home runs in Little League, and when he grew to be a man amongst boys while playing basketball in grade school. He was so competitive that when he was playing Little League, he gave up a home run and afterwards got pretty emotional about it. So his coaches came to the house, sat in the living room with Kevin and his dad, and keep in mind, he's just 10 years old, and they tell Kevin, be less competitive. His dad didn't appreciate that and told his coaches to get out of his house. Kevin was passionate about becoming a pro athlete. So when his dad saw that obsession he had, he knew what it could possibly become. So he started to teach Kevin pieces of Bill Walton's game and started to give him more and more VHS tapes, all the way up to the point that on Christmas, instead of Kevin asking for toys and stuff kids that are 10 years old would ask for, Kevin would instead ask for more VHS tapes of NBA legends to watch. Not long after, Kevin was practicing the same alley passes Wes Unseld was making back in the 70s. With his dad being his coach, he would have him play with his older brother Colin, who was a few years older. And by middle school, Kevin was over 6 foot and 200 pounds. So with him playing against kids that were now in high school, in the AAU games he was playing in, he was continuing to dog kids that were actually his age. But even though basketball was Kevin's first love, he was possibly better on the diamond. Not only was Kevin a Little League legend, but by the age of 14, K Love was throwing 90 miles an hour. Klay Thompson actually played on the same Little League team as Kevin, and according to Thompson's dad, Michael, Kevin was the second coming of Nolan Ryan. Nonetheless, basketball was what Kevin was most focused on, and his parents made sure that. When he tried telling his dad he wanted to play football at a young age, his dad handed him a basketball, went to a local court, walked in the painted area, and told Kevin, "This is your football field." And from that point on, Kevin knew basketball was his main priority. So by the time high school came around, Kevin dropped to baseball. That way he could play AAU basketball, which would turn out to be a pretty good decision. As a freshman, Kevin wasn't really new to high school basketball because these kids he had been competing against his entire life. So because of that, Kevin was pretty prepared and was a starter his freshman year. And by the end of the year, he was second team All-State. Just 1 year later, Kevin was a standout, leading Lake Oswego to the state championship. So unsurprisingly, when the season ended, not only did college scouts become interested, but Kevin was on the radar of shoe companies. So in the summer of '05, Kevin attended Vaccaro's ABCD camp, which at the time was the yearly summer showcase which became the staple of college basketball recruiting. This would be his chance to prove himself against not only some of the best big men in the country, but the best player in the nation, Greg Oden. According to the guy who ran the camp, Sonny Vaccaro, Kevin gave Greg Oden, who was not only the #1 ranked player in the country, but a grade older, some serious work. So not long after, Kevin found himself joining the SoCal All-Stars with former NBA players Brandon Jennings and Chase Budinger. They would lose just 2 games, and those 2 games they lost were when they were without Kevin. So from this point, Kevin was heralded as a top 5 player in the class of 2007. And in July, going into his senior year, Kevin was between UCLA and UNC, and so he committed to Oregon's conference rival, UCLA. And by the end of the year, Kevin had broke the Oregon State prep scoring record with over 2,600 points, while leading his high school team for the 3rd straight year to the state championship, before losing to Kyle Singler. But that was okay. Kevin would be named the National Athlete of the Year, leaving Oregon with a very long list of accomplishments. So when Kevin arrived in Westwood looking like this, people only knew him as Mike Love's nephew, the guy from the Beach Boys. Despite some people not knowing who he actually was, Kevin still had pretty high expectations as a freshman. So when junior guard Darren Collison missed the start of the season, his college roommate Russell Westbrook was put in the starting lineup with him, and very quickly these two not only became best friends on the court, court, but even off of it. The two were awesome, and the two's draft stocks started to quickly rise. And by the time the tournament rolled around, UCLA would get the 1 seed and make it all the way up to the Final Four before being eliminated in the semifinals against Derrick Rose and the Memphis Tigers. As a freshman, Kevin led his team in scoring and rebounding while winning the Pac-10 Player of the Year. And going into it, Kevin Love knew he would be a one and done anyways, so it was no surprise he entered the NBA draft. And when draft night came around, he got taken by the Memphis Grizzlies, which was pretty sweet. Not so fast. Kevin was being traded to the Minnesota Timberwolves. Kevin Love came in his rookie year, and he was coming in off of the bench because their starting center, Al Jefferson, had a pretty similar play style. And when Al Jefferson tore his ACL, Kevin started to get more starts in the starting lineup. Being on all-rookie second team and showing he was going to be a pretty good player, he emerged himself, though, as the franchise power forward. And with Al Jefferson being a 20-10 guy, all they now needed were the guards. They not only had the 6th pick, but with them trading Randy Foye and Mike Miller to Washington, they also had the 5th pick as well. So in a class had James Harden, Ricky Rubio, Steph Curry, and Johnny Flynn. They had 2 top 6 picks to fill the void at point guard.
With the 5th pick in the 2009 NBA draft, the Minnesota Timberwolves select Ricky Rubio. With the 6th pick in the 2009 NBA draft, the Minnesota Timberwolves select Johnny Flynn from Syracuse University.
And the next few seasons, the Timberwolves would use their top 5 picks on Wesley Johnson and Derrick Williams. So for Kevin Love, there wasn't much more help coming. Going into his 2nd season, he continued to improve, with the organization realizing Kevin Love had a lot more upside, and he was their franchise guy. Because 2010 would be Al Jefferson's last year as a Timberwolf, clearing the way for Kevin to take over, not just in the starting lineup, but as a franchise guy. And in 2011, Kevin proved the Timberwolves were right. During the year, he put up a 30-30 game against the Knicks. And before people knew it, Kevin Love was Yao Ming's replacement in the All-Star game. And in 2012, Kevin Love got even better, emerging himself as a top 20 player. Despite that, though, Glenn Taylor did not want to give Kevin Love the contract he deserved, really getting more and more impatient as the years went on. It was pretty clear Kevin Love wanted out of Minnesota. 2013 was a little bit disappointing. Kevin Love would fracture 2 bones in his shooting hand. And the injuries, they continued to pile on more and more. By the end of the year, Kevin Love had played just 18 games. But with how stacked the Western Conference was, the Timberwolves were far away from being a true playoff team. And so the Timberwolves granted his request. Kevin Love was going to go pair up with LeBron James and an incredibly talented young guard in Kyrie Irving. This was his opportunity to not only make the playoffs for the first time, but to even win a championship. Kevin Love's first year in Cleveland was interesting. He lost a ton of weight to the point he was just 5% body fat and a little bit over 230 pounds. But people knew Kevin Love was going to have to play a different play style than his one in Minnesota, because instead of him being the #1 guy, he was going to be the #2 option. At least that's what people thought. Because when Kevin arrived to Cleveland, he was playing in a totally different role as a spot-up shooter. And in round 1, they were up 3-0 against the Boston Celtics before. So early on in a pretty meaningless first round, Kevin Love dislocated his left shoulder. And with him having to undergo surgery, that meant Kevin was done for the playoffs. And the Cavaliers were going to have to go without him. And the Cavaliers got to the finals, both Kyrie Irving falling next in Game 1. 2015 left a ton to be desired, but it was for injuries. When 2016 came around, the Cavaliers handled business in the first 2 rounds before winning in 6 games against the Raptors to go to the finals. And for Kevin Love, this was his first time getting to play in the finals. He's tasked with helping the Cavaliers come back from a 3-1 deficit, which has never been done before in the finals. And when he came back, the Cavaliers really just used him in a role for rebounding and defensive purposes only. In Game 7, Kevin would play 30 minutes, and even though his box score didn't look that impressive, he would go on to have 14 rebounds and one of the biggest stops in finals history. The Cavaliers would go on to make the finals in 2017, but this time they're up against. And when Kyrie Irving requested a trade and was eventually moved to Boston, that meant Kevin Love had to adjust once again to a new role in Cleveland with a much larger role next to LeBron. And when the season began, the Cavs were 4-5, which leads me to November 5th, 2017. It was a home game against the Atlanta Hawks, but right then and there, Kevin Love's life changed.
call it a stigma, or call it a fear or insecurity. But what I was worried about wasn't just my own inner struggles, but how difficult it was to talk about them. I remember when I was 2 or 3 years in the league, I'd never heard of a pro athlete talking about mental health, and I didn't want to be the only one. I didn't want to look weak. Honestly, I just didn't think I needed it. But it's kind of strange when you think about it. In the NBA, you have trained professionals to fine-tune your life in so many areas. But none of those people could help me in the way I needed when I was lying on the floor struggling to breathe. I'm just starting to do the hard work of getting to know myself. For 29 years, I've avoided that. So I did one seemingly little thing that turned out to be a big thing. The Cavs helped me find a therapist, and I set up an appointment.
I can't speak for Kevin Love specifically, nor is this video me trying to defend Kevin Love's actions on the courts, but an explanation of what's gone on in Kevin's life. He's realized his entire life his intentions have been on the totally wrong place. And this breakthrough in Kevin's understanding of life itself has changed his entire outlook on basketball, using it for the joy of the game rather than an outlet to just get all of his emotions and anxiety out on, which to me makes total sense. Kevin Love has basically achieved everything somebody can dream of, but no matter how many championships or accolades he accomplishes, that will never achieve happiness and a peaceful state of mind for Kevin. And there's naturally things in life we look back at and say, yeah, I wish I could change that. And for Kevin, he's no different. People are going to criticize him for it very easily, which is understandable. But most importantly, he's opened up and realized basketball is his career. And naturally, in our careers, we're going to make mistakes we're not proud of. But the platform he's gotten from the NBA has led to his calling in life. If you are going through anything, definitely listen to some of the podcasts Kevin Love has been on, because I promise you, it will change your entire perspective on not only mental health, but the way you look at life. The way you look at life. And to all my strong supporters, I want to say thank you.